After 27,000 abusive miles, it is finally time to change the clutch on my 2020 KTM 390 Adventure. So if you also need to change your clutch, stick around and we will do it together. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. As I said in the intro, I've got 27,000 miles on my 2020 KTM 390 Adventure, and they have been hard miles. I've done a lot of sand and just a lot of rocky, steep type climbing and riding that really takes its toll on the clutch. And I'm not easy on a clutch, so I probably prematurely burned this clutch out. So with that being said, I have about this much friction zone and I should have about that much. Normally the friction zone starts engaging about midway through the clutch release, and mine is at the very end. So it makes it a little challenging to ride, especially in technical terrain when you don't have a lot of friction zone. So I was getting concerned that if I continued to ride it this way, I was going to completely burn up the clutch and then be stuck on the trail, which I didn't want to do. So now is a good time to do that. So if you also are needing to change the clutch on your bike, I'm going to go through the steps in as much detail as I possibly can. Clutch replacements are not really all that technically difficult. However, with this particular clutch, what I have noticed in looking at the cutout is that there are two different sizes of friction plates that go on either side of the clutch pack. So I'm going to have to pay very close attention to the part numbers and where they go. Also, one of the metal friction pads, not the fiber, is a little bit different size than the others. It has a different part number as well. So what I did is I ordered the entire clutch pack off of one of the KTM suppliers, and I tried finding just an individual friction plate clutch pack, and I couldn't do it. I've seen other people doing Duke 390 clutch replacements and just getting EBC clutch replacements. I couldn't find it. I don't know where they were getting it. The best I was able to do was wait until there was a discount code on one of the KTM supplier websites so I could get it at a cheaper price. I think normally the entire clutch pack is about $190. I paid, I think, $150 because of the discount, which, since I couldn't find just the friction plates, it was good enough for me. If you have never replaced a clutch before, you'll see this and make a decision whether or not you think you can do it. Now, with this particular pack, there are the stutter rings that came new, and then also new springs. So when this is all done, my clutch should feel like it did the day I bought it. Should feel brand new. Now, one of the things I would recommend doing if you are going to replace your clutch is I printed out the cutout sheet so that I would see the part numbers and then also where they go in the clutch pack to make sure that I get the right pieces in the right place. It should be pretty simple. When I take the old clutch out, I should just be able to line it up and go from there. But just in case, I went ahead and did this because in this pack, the clutch pack, everything is wrapped individually. So with its part numbers, but because it's all individually pieced and it's not just a pack altogether, I'm gonna have to do that. So let's get started with this process. Before we get into working on this, I want to go over the tools that you'll need real quick. It's a pretty short list. 8mm socket just for pulling off the case bolts, and then a 10mm socket that you'll use to pull off the plate that holds the clutch together where the springs are. And some of them you might need an extension, or I used a nut driver pulling the case bolts out just because I couldn't get this short a socket in there. Everything was loose enough where I could do it with a nut driver, and then also a 6mm hex that I used to pull the brake lever off. And I also recommend a little tiny screwdriver to help separate the clutch plates as you're trying to pull those out, especially when you get down to the stutter rings. Those were a little bit hard to get out. The oil keeps them stuck in there. So I use that. And then if you don't have a torque wrench, I really recommend having one. I was sent an Anpuds torque wrench. It is a 1/4 inch torque wrench, which I think is really important to have, especially doing work on the bike. you don't want to over torque the case bolts. You want to make sure that you get those set to the proper specs. And if you're trying to do it by hand tightening is known to over torque all the bolts, and you don't want to break the case. So I will be giving this away. This was sent to me. So if you're interested in getting a 1/4 inch torque wrench, stay to the end of the video and I will tell you how to get this. I will also leave a link in the description below if you don't have one and you are looking for a torque wrench. All right, first thing to do when you're changing your clutch, and what I always do when I'm changing a clutch, is I soak the fiber plates, friction plates in oil overnight to allow those to get some oil in them so that it's not basically a dry clutch plate going in there. So what I'm going to do is basically remove all these from the plastic and then soak all of the friction plates together. Now I've already taken note, and I'm going to mention this now, that there are two different sizes of these plates, which the smaller one is called for part number 8. If you're looking at the cutout that I'll put on here, it's the narrower one. And then the other one is 6. So I made a note on my cutout sheet that the narrower friction plate was 8, so that I can just mix these all in the same 1-gallon Ziploc bag with oil and let them soak, and I know which is which. So that's what I would recommend doing. So I'm going to get started on that now. So I'm going to set that in there, and I have the actual engine oil that I'm going to use, same type, and I'm just going to pour that in there. Should be enough. And squish it around a little bit, and then let it sit overnight so that these plates can absorb the oil. So yeah, now we can start taking the cover off. And I did buy a new gasket, so I'm not worried about trying to save the gasket. And let's get started on that. Okay, the skid plate has been removed. As you can see, I've also taken the crash bars off. I was just trying to get more space in here. And then I do recommend, before you do something like this, clean the engine. I cleaned it as well as I could. Temperatures are really cold outside, so I just did it really quickly when it was somewhat warmer. So yeah, I've already drained the oil out of this. My bike was due for service, so I've changed the filter so it's ready to have oil put back in once I'm all done here. So basically it's just get started on taking the clutch cover off, which is this area here. Now I'm looking at the brake pedal. The brake pedal looks like it's going to cause some clearance issues and getting access. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the brake pedal off just so I have more room in here and be able to get to everything. So I'm going to get started. If there's any little things that I see as I'm going through, I will make sure I point those out as I go. I have the brake pedal loosened up so that I have room to get in here. And I've already removed this sensor. I believe this is the gear indicator. So I've already taken that and just set this back to the side. And then I'll start taking this part. Now, the next thing I want to do is get the clutch cable disconnected and take this apparatus here off. But after that, it's once the clutch cable's off, then I can start working on getting the case taken apart. If you've never taken a clutch cable off before, you just loosen everything. So I've slid the barrel down as far as I can, and then there's a little bit of play here in the adjuster here, or the clutch lever, and then the cable, there's a slot right in here that the cable goes through, and then once you get the cable out, you're done. So that is disconnected. I have all the bolts pulled out, and I have arranged these in order so I know exactly how they came out so that they'll go back in the exact same way. They're all the same size, but I wanted to make sure that if any of them were of different size, I knew exactly where they came out. So I have also placed a rag underneath the case. I have a feeling that when I pop the case off, a little bit of oil is likely going to drip down, so I want to try to collect that. So yeah, that's coming right off. All right, so that came off really easily, and the gasket's not damaged, but I have a new one, so I will use the new gasket. Next step is to take this spring-loaded cover here and basically when you do this, just turn them a couple turns at a time and just work your way around while it slowly comes out because it's spring loaded. We'll get started on that. All right, we got all these loosened up. Let's pull these out with the springs. All right, that's all out. I'm gonna set the springs in the cover, in this cover here. Now it's time to start pulling the clutch pack apart and getting it out of the basket. There's one thing I want to note is that the very first friction plate sits in the notch here and not lined up with the others. So this is important, the way they designed it. So I just have to remember that the very last friction plate I put in is going to be notched in the clutch basket here, not lined up with all the others. I'm going to start pulling this apart. All right, so I'm going to pull that first one off. I'm going to set that down. All right. I'm not sure if you can see that, but this there's not much fiber left. It's pretty much gone. And then wow, you can see the inside here. This is the first metal friction plate in here. You can see how burned up this is, and how this clutch is gone. Like I said earlier, I'm hard on clutches, and that's a pretty good indication of how hard I am on them. So just looking at this, I'll take this next ring out. All right, so the outer, this is another note, the outer, so this is the first two rings. So you have your metal ring here, this one that's very burned. It actually notches in to the outer part of the basket. So you have to make sure that you get the small one on the outside and then you notch it in there before you set it in here. So that's going to be very important on reassembly. So it's not going to notch in here. All right, I just pulled the first stutter ring out, and the bevel is sitting like this in this direction. So the outside of it is going to sit up from the other one. So I'm going to make sure that this goes in the right way. And then I've got the second one here that I'm really tricky to get this one to release. And this one feels like it might have a little bit of a bevel going this way, but not much. So I'll see how the new one feels and try to make sure I get it in that same way. But that first one is the important one to make sure that bevel is going out the right way. So let's get started in putting this back together. Okay, I'm going to reference the cutout real quick just to make sure. So 4 is the inner one, and that is the seat judder spring, which is 35,000 or 35000. Should be this one. Yeah, 35000. So I'm going to cut that out. Now, feeling the one that I took out, it felt like it had a little bit of a machining edge on the inside. So that's how I'm going to put it back on. And this is already got a little bit of oil. I'm going to just grab a little bit of oil and put on here and then slide that in. Okay. Okay. Also, I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little bit of oil. And I know how this needs to go. The bevel needs to go out like this. So I'm going to set this ring in there. And we're done. Now, if we look at our cutout, the next plate that goes in is a number 8, and that is the narrow one. So we're going to put the narrow one in. The first one I put in is going to be a narrow one. So I have these arranged so I know which order to take out. I'll put the first one in. And that should go over the judder rings. All right, time to put these in. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the plate just to coat it before it goes in. Set that in there. The next 4 fiber plates are the bigger standard ones. So I'll put each of those in. All right, we're down to the last bits here. So I have the narrower ones to put on. So I've got this narrow one. So that's the number 8. So I got that on. We have this one that's actually going to go on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, take these off. You can see how burnt that is. This on here. And let me oil this up. I've got that oiled. We're going to get that fit on there. And then this last one is the one that needs to go in these outer spot here. I got this all seated up where it fits. And then I'm going to put the new springs in since I have them. And then we'll just slowly start tightening this up. The next thing there is to do is to clean off the old gasket so that I can put the new one on in whichever configuration it needs to go in. So that's what I'm going to do is get this old gasket cleaned off, get this on, and then we'll be able to put the case back together. I've tucked a rag in and around the clutch area, so as I'm pulling this gasket and it flakes off, it doesn't get in the crankcase, and I'll be able to keep all that stuff out of there. So this is just something you can do in order to not get all that stuff in there. The gasket surface has been cleaned, and I have the new gasket in place. So now it's just a matter of putting the case back together. And I checked to see what the torque specs were on the case itself. I could not find any listed. I'm going to use, I think, 6 Newton meters on all these. And the reason I'm doing that is most of these were hand tight. I was able to just twist them off. I want to make sure I don't over torque anything. So I'm going to set it at that and go from there. Putting everything back together on the brake lever, I'm putting some Loctite to hold that in place, and we'll get that put in. And then the only thing I have left to do is hook up the clutch cable. The clutch is in, everything is done, oil is back in. It is extremely cold right now. It's in the 30s and it has been very muddy. I have a bunch of other work to do on the bike. So other than just feeling where the friction zone is in the garage as I was resetting the oil reminder, the service reminder, I now know that the friction zone starts about halfway through the clutch release instead of at the very end, which it should. It's brand new. So I don't really have any concerns from there. It is good to have a new clutch on this bike. It'll make it much easier to ride, and hopefully I'll get another 25 to 30,000 miles on it. So if you have stuck around to the end and you're interested in this torque wrench, send me an email, and the first person who sends me an email, I will send this to. So don't send your name or address. Just send me an email that I'm interested in the 1/4 inch torque wrench, and as soon as I see that, I will let you know. And you can email me back with your name and address, and I'll get that sent out to you. So hopefully you found this useful if you need to change a clutch on your bike as well. Thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there. All right, to give you an idea of what a burned out clutch looks like, you can see how this is new. This is the one that has seen a lot of high temperatures. This one's probably one of the worst